Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that will make your skin crawl and your stomach turn. We're diving deep into the shadowy world of ancient pirates and how they planned their most audacious heists. Forget the romanticized tales of treasure maps and noble rogues. The truth is far more calculating, brutal, and methodical than Hollywood ever dared to show you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this: you're a merchant captain in the year 1720, sailing through the crystal blue waters of the Caribbean with a hull full of Spanish silver and precious spices. The sun beats down mercilessly, your crew is tired, and the nearest safe harbour is still 3 days away. What you don't know is that for the past 2 weeks, you've been watched, studied. Your route has been mapped, your cargo assessed, and your weaknesses catalogued by men who turn violence into an art form. These weren't the bumbling drunkards stumbling around with parrots on their shoulders. These were maritime predators who understood that successful piracy wasn't about luck or bravery. It was about intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and surgical execution. They were businessmen who happened to use cannons instead of contracts. The golden age of piracy, roughly from 1650 to 1730, produced some of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises the world had ever seen. Men like Bartholomew Roberts, who captured over 400 ships in his career, or Henry Morgan, who orchestrated raids so complex they resembled military campaigns. These weren't random acts of violence. They were carefully orchestrated operations that required months of preparation and a level of planning that would impress modern intelligence agencies. But here's what makes their methods so fascinating and so terrifying. Pirates didn't just rely on superior firepower or intimidation. They were masters of psychological warfare, espionage, and what we'd now call social engineering. They infiltrated port towns, bribed dock workers, and planted spies in taverns. They studied wind patterns, tidal charts, and shipping schedules with the dedication of scholars. And when they finally struck, it wasn't with wild abandon, it was with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Tonight we're going to pull back the curtain on their world. We'll explore how pirates gathered intelligence on their targets, how they planned their attacks down to the smallest detail, and how they managed to stay one step ahead of the most powerful navies in the world. Because understanding how ancient pirates planned their heists isn't just about history, it's about understanding the darker side of human ingenuity and the lengths people will go to when survival and greed collide. The first thing you need to understand about pirate operations is that they began long before any ship ever left port. In the smoky taverns and crowded marketplaces of places like Port Royal, Tortuga, and Nassau, a different kind of commerce was taking place. Information was being bought and sold like any other commodity, and pirates were some of the most eager customers. Every successful pirate crew maintained what we might call an intelligence network. These weren't formal organisations with ranks and titles, but loose collections of informants, sympathisers, and corrupt officials who could provide crucial information about potential targets. A dock worker might whisper about a particularly valuable cargo being loaded. A tavern keeper might overhear a merchant discussing his planned route. A customs official might be persuaded, through either coin or coercion, to share details about shipping schedules. The pirates understood something that many of their contemporaries didn't. Information was power, and the right piece of intelligence could be worth more than a chest of gold. They knew that attacking a random ship was gambling, but attacking the right ship at the right time was practically guaranteed profit. Consider the methods employed by Samuel Bellamy, known as Black Sam, one of the most successful pirates of his era. Bellamy didn't simply sail around hoping to stumble upon treasure ships. Instead, he cultivated relationships with merchants, sailors, and even fellow pirates who could provide him with detailed information about valuable cargoes and vulnerable vessels. He would spend weeks in port buying drinks for sailors and listening to their stories about recent voyages and planned expeditions. But gathering information was only the beginning. Once pirates identified a potential target, they had to plan their approach with military precision. This meant studying everything they could about their intended victim. What kind of ship was it? How many crew members did it carry? What weapons did it have? What was its typical route? And where would it be most vulnerable? Pirates would often follow potential targets for days or even weeks, staying just out of sight while observing their patterns. They noted when the crew changed watch, how the ship responded to different weather conditions, and whether there were any obvious weaknesses in its defences. Some pirates would even send scouts ahead to coastal towns where the target ship was expected to dock, gathering additional intelligence about its cargo and crew. The level of detail in their planning was extraordinary. Pirates knew that merchant ships were most vulnerable during certain times of day, particularly during the early morning hours when crews were still groggy and less alert. They understood that ships heavily loaded with cargo were slower and less manoeuvrable, making them easier targets. But gathering intelligence was only half the battle. Once pirates had identified a promising target and mapped out its weaknesses, they faced their next crucial challenge: timing. The difference between a successful raid and a watery grave often came down to choosing the perfect moment to strike. Experienced pirates understood that timing wasn't just about when a ship was most vulnerable. It was about orchestrating multiple variables into a single decisive window of opportunity. They studied weather patterns with the dedication of natural philosophers, knowing that fog could provide cover, while storms could scatter their prey or dash their own vessels against hidden reefs. The most successful pirate captains developed an almost supernatural sense for reading atmospheric conditions. They could smell rain hours before it arrived, feel the subtle pressure changes that preceded squalls, and recognize the particular quality of light that indicated shifting winds. This wasn't mysticism, it was survival distilled into instinct through years of careful observation. Samuel Bellamy, known as Black Sam, was particularly renowned for his ability to exploit weather patterns. He would position his ship, the Wider, just beyond the horizon during the day, then use the cover of dusk and incoming weather fronts to approach merchant vessels when visibility dropped and escape routes became limited. His crew learned to read his subtle hand signals, understanding that a successful attack required absolute coordination between wind, tide, and human timing. But weather was just one element in the pirates' temporal calculations. They also studied the rhythms of their targets with obsessive attention to detail. Merchant ships followed predictable patterns, much like the tides themselves. Crews would be most alert during daylight hours and immediately after dawn, when the previous night's watch ended and fresh eyes took their posts. But there were windows of vulnerability that experienced pirates learned to exploit. The hour just before sunset was particularly favoured by many pirate crews. The light would be fading, making it difficult for lookouts to distinguish between legitimate vessels and potential threats. Crews would be focused on preparing for the night watch, adjusting sails for changing wind conditions, and securing cargo for the evening. It was a time of transition, when attention was divided and reaction time slower. Edward Thatch, better known as Blackbeard, preferred the opposite approach. He often struck at dawn, when merchant crews were groggy from sleep, and the morning sun created a natural blind spot for anyone looking eastward. His massive flagship, Queen Anne's Revenge, would appear like a nightmare emerging from the dawn light, its black sails silhouetted against the rising sun. The psychological impact of this timing was carefully calculated. There's something particularly demoralizing about being attacked at daybreak, when the mind is still transitioning from sleep to wakefulness. Merchant crews, already anxious about the long day ahead, would find their worst fears manifesting just as they believed they'd survived another night at sea. Pirates also learned to exploit the seasonal patterns that governed maritime trade. They understood that certain shipping routes became more active during specific months, as merchants rushed to deliver goods before winter storms or monsoon seasons made travel impossible. These periods of increased activity created both opportunities and challenges. During peak shipping seasons, pirates could expect to encounter more targets, but they also faced increased naval patrols and better coordinated merchant convoys. The most successful captains learned to position themselves along secondary routes, where desperate merchants might choose speed over safety, taking less protected paths to beat their competitors to port. The timing of attacks also had to account for the pirates' own limitations. Extended periods at sea meant dwindling supplies of fresh water and food. Crews needed regular opportunities to careen their ships, scraping barnacles and repairing damage that accumulated during long voyages. These maintenance requirements created their own temporal constraints, forcing pirates to balance the ideal timing for attacks against the practical needs of keeping their vessels seaworthy. Many pirate crews developed elaborate systems for tracking time and coordinating their activities. Without accurate chronometers, which were expensive and rare, they relied on celestial navigation, hourglasses, and carefully maintained ship's logs. Some captains employed former naval officers who understood the intricacies of maritime timekeeping and could calculate optimal attack windows with mathematical precision. The coordination required for these timed attacks reveals another layer of sophistication in pirate operations. Unlike the popular image of chaotic, undisciplined raiders, successful pirate crews operated with military-like precision. Every crew member had specific responsibilities during an attack, from the lookouts who first spotted targets to the gunners who manned the cannons. These roles were rehearsed constantly during long voyages. Pirates would practice boarding maneuvers, weapons handling, and emergency procedures until they could execute complex operations even in darkness or rough seas. The most successful crews could transition from appearing like harmless merchant vessels to revealing themselves as predators in a matter of minutes. The element of surprise was crucial to these operations, but it required more than just good timing. Pirates developed elaborate deception techniques, flying false colours to approach their targets without raising alarm. They would study the flags and identifying characteristics of legitimate merchant vessels, sometimes capturing ships specifically to use as decoys for future operations. This practice of using captured vessels as Trojan horses added another dimension to pirate strategy. A ship that had been recently taken might still appear on shipping manifests and be expected at certain ports. Pirates could exploit this window of legitimacy, using the captured vessel's identity to approach other ships, or even enter harbours before their true nature was discovered. The psychological warfare began long before the actual attack. Pirates understood that their reputation often preceded them, and they used this to their advantage. The mere sight of a black flag on the horizon was often enough to cause merchant vessels to surrender without resistance. This wasn't accidental. It was the result of carefully cultivated terror campaigns designed to minimize actual fighting and maximize psychological impact. But creating this reputation required consistent follow-through. Pirates who showed mercy to surrendering crews found that word spread quickly through maritime networks, making future targets more likely to give up without bloodshed. Conversely, those who gained reputations for excessive cruelty often found themselves facing desperate resistance from crews who believed they had nothing to lose. The most sophisticated pirate operations integrated all these elements, timing, weather, psychology, and reputation, into comprehensive strategic plans that could adapt to changing circumstances. They understood that no plan survived contact with reality unchanged, so they built flexibility into their operations while maintaining the core objective of successful capture with minimal risk to their own crews. This strategic thinking extended beyond individual attacks to longer-term operational planning. Successful pirate captains thought like military commanders, considering supply lines, safe harbours, and political developments that might affect their activities. They established networks of contacts in various ports, maintained relationships with corrupt officials, and even negotiated informal treaties with local governors who found pirate activities profitable. The golden age of piracy wasn't just about individual acts of maritime theft. It was about the emergence of a parallel maritime economy, complete with its own intelligence networks, strategic planning systems, and operational methodologies that rivaled those of legitimate naval forces. These weren't random criminals stumbling into success. They were innovative tacticians who revolutionized naval warfare through necessity and cunning. While pirates made their mark across the world's oceans, the methods they used to plan and execute their heists were far more sophisticated than most realize. These maritime criminals operated with the precision of military units, combining intelligence gathering, strategic timing, and psychological warfare to maximize their success. The foundation of any successful pirate operation began long before ships ever crossed paths on the open sea. Pirates understood that knowledge was power, and they invested heavily in building networks of informants across every major port. Tavern keepers, dock workers, ship chandlers, and even corrupt customs officials all played crucial roles in feeding information back to pirate crews. These sources provided details about cargo manifests, sailing schedules, crew sizes, and the defensive capabilities of potential targets. Port towns became intelligence hubs, where pirates could learn which ships carried the most valuable cargo. A merchant vessel, loaded with Spanish silver, would obviously be more attractive than one carrying lumber or grain. But pirates also needed to know about escort ships, the experience of the captain and crew, and whether the vessel carried any special defensive measures. This information network was so extensive that pirates often knew more about a ship's contents and capabilities than the ship's own crew. The timing of pirate attacks was never left to chance. Experienced pirates studied weather patterns, trade routes, and seasonal shipping schedules with the dedication of professional meteorologists and navigators. They knew that merchant ships travelling certain routes would be vulnerable at specific times of year, when prevailing winds might slow their progress or when seasonal storms could separate them from protective convoys. Pirates also understood the importance of attacking when their targets were most vulnerable. Ships leaving port were often heavily loaded and sitting low in the water, making them slower and less manoeuvrable. Vessels nearing the end of long voyages might have crews weakened by scurvy or other illnesses. Pirates would position themselves along known shipping lanes, particularly near narrow straits or island chains, where merchant ships had limited room to manoeuvre. The psychological aspect of pirate warfare was perhaps their most sophisticated tool. Pirates cultivated reputations that preceded them across the seas, using fear as a weapon more powerful than any cannon. The sight of a black flag on the horizon was often enough to convince merchant crews to surrender without a fight. Pirates understood that their reputation for ruthlessness, while sometimes exaggerated, saved them from having to engage in costly battles that could damage valuable cargo or result in casualties among their own crews. Different pirate captains developed distinct calling cards and reputations. Some were known for showing mercy to crews that surrendered quickly, while others built fearsome reputations for brutality toward those who resisted. This psychological warfare was carefully calculated. Pirates wanted to be feared enough that resistance seemed futile, but not so brutal that every encounter became a fight to the death. Deception played a central role in pirate tactics. False flags were commonly used to approach unsuspecting vessels. A pirate ship might fly the colours of a friendly nation, or even pose as a naval vessel, conducting routine inspections. By the time the target realised the deception, it was usually too late to escape. Pirates also used decoy ships and coordinated attacks, with multiple vessels converging on a target from different directions to prevent escape. The planning phase of a pirate operation involved detailed consideration of escape routes and contingency plans. Pirates needed to know not just how to catch their prey, but how to disappear afterward. This meant having intimate knowledge of hidden coves, friendly ports where they could sell stolen goods, and alternative routes that would allow them to evade pursuit by naval forces. Communication between pirate ships was surprisingly sophisticated for the era. Pirates developed systems of signals using flags, lights, and even cannon fire to coordinate complex operations across multiple vessels. These communication methods allowed them to execute pincer movements, feints, and other tactical maneuvers that would have been impossible without careful planning and practice. The actual boarding and capture of enemy vessels required military-level coordination. Pirates practiced these operations repeatedly, developing specialized roles for each crew member. Some pirates were designated as sharpshooters to pick off key personnel on the target ship, while others were responsible for grappling and boarding. The goal was to overwhelm the enemy quickly and decisively, minimizing both resistance and the risk of damage to valuable cargo. Pirates also understood the importance of intelligence gathering during and after successful raids. Captured crew members were often interrogated for information about other ships, trade routes, and potential targets. This information fed back into the planning cycle for future operations, creating a continuous loop of intelligence that made pirate operations increasingly effective over time. The logistics of pirate operations extended far beyond the actual raids. Pirates needed to maintain their ships, acquire supplies, and find markets for stolen goods. This required establishing relationships with corrupt officials, black market traders, and sympathetic merchants who were willing to deal with obviously stolen merchandise. Some pirate operations were so well organized that they essentially functioned as alternative trading networks, competing directly with legitimate commerce. The most successful pirate captains understood that their operations needed to be sustainable over the long term. This meant not just planning individual raids, but developing strategies that would allow them to continue operating for months or years. They needed to balance aggressive raiding with the need to avoid provoking overwhelming responses from naval forces. Too much success in a particular area might bring unwanted attention from heavily armed naval squadrons. The decline of the golden age of piracy came about partly because naval forces began adopting some of the same strategic and tactical innovations that had made pirates so successful. Improved intelligence networks, better coordination between naval forces, and the use of decoy ships and false information began to turn the tables on pirate operations. The hunters had learned from the hunted, and the sophisticated planning that had once given pirates the advantage was now being used against them. Today, when we think of pirate heists, we often imagine spontaneous attacks by desperate criminals. The reality was far more complex and sophisticated. The most successful pirates of the Golden Age operated more like maritime special forces, combining intelligence gathering, strategic planning, psychological warfare, and tactical innovation in ways that would have impressed professional military commanders. Heist planning in the Golden Age, intelligence, timing, and precision. The success of any pirate operation depended far more on meticulous planning than Hollywood's swashbuckling tales would have you believe. While popular culture paints pirates as chaotic raiders acting on impulse, the reality was quite different. The most successful pirate crews operated like sophisticated intelligence agencies, gathering information weeks or even months before striking their targets. Intelligence networks formed the backbone of pirate operations. These weren't random collections of cutthroats, but carefully cultivated webs of informants spanning entire coastlines. Tavern keepers in port towns whispered about incoming cargo ships. Corrupt customs officials leaked shipping manifests for the right price. Dock workers shared details about vessel armaments, and crew sizes. Even merchant sailors, bitter about poor pay or harsh treatment, sometimes provided valuable intelligence about their own ship's routes and vulnerabilities. The gathering of this intelligence required patience and investment. Pirates would send scouts to major ports disguised as merchants, sailors seeking work, or even as travelling entertainers. These operatives would spend days or weeks establishing contacts, learning schedules, and mapping the social networks that controlled maritime commerce. They memorized which ships carried the most valuable cargo, which captains were known for heavy armaments, and which routes offered the best opportunities for ambush. Weather patterns played a crucial role in planning successful raids. Experienced pirate captains studied seasonal wind patterns, storm cycles, and tidal charts with the dedication of natural philosophers. They knew that merchant vessels, heavily laden with cargo, were most vulnerable during certain weather conditions, when their maneuverability was compromised. Fog banks provided perfect cover for surprise attacks, while knowledge of hidden coves and shallow channels gave pirates escape routes that pursuing naval vessels couldn't follow. The timing of attacks required extraordinary precision. Pirates had to coordinate their movements with merchant shipping schedules, often tracking multiple vessels simultaneously to choose the most profitable target. They calculated travel times between ports, accounting for cargo loading delays, weather-related detours, and the varying speeds of different ship types. A successful raid might depend on intercepting a treasure galleon at exactly the right point along its route, where naval patrols were thin and escape routes were numerous. Communication systems between pirate vessels were surprisingly sophisticated. Using signal flags, cannon shots fired in specific patterns, and even trained birds, pirate fleets could coordinate complex operations across vast distances. These communication networks allowed for real-time adjustments to raid plans, enabling pirates to respond to unexpected opportunities or threats. Multiple crews might converge on a single target from different directions, creating overwhelming force while minimizing individual risk. The psychological aspect of heist planning cannot be understated. Successful pirates understood that their reputation was often their most powerful weapon. They carefully cultivated images of either merciless brutality or surprising mercy, depending on which served their purposes better. Word would spread through maritime communities about how certain pirate crews treated their captives, and this reputation often determined whether merchant crews would fight desperately or surrender quickly when confronted. Deception formed another critical element of pirate strategy. False flags were commonly employed, with pirate vessels flying the colours of friendly nations to approach unsuspecting targets. Some crews maintained multiple sets of national flags and would change their apparent allegiance based on the nationality of their intended victims. Decoy ships, often captured merchant vessels sailing under pirate command, would be used to lure naval patrols away from intended target areas. The logistics of sustaining pirate operations required extensive planning and resource management. Successful crews established relationships with suppliers in remote locations who could provide food, water, weapons, and ship repairs. These supply networks often extended across multiple islands and coastal regions, creating redundant systems that ensured operations could continue even if some sources were compromised. Pirates also developed sophisticated methods for dividing and storing their plunder, often burying treasure in multiple locations to minimize losses if one cache was discovered. Training and role specialization within pirate crews reflected their professional approach to maritime robbery. While every crew member needed basic sailing and fighting skills, successful pirate ships also included specialists in navigation, artillery, carpentry, and medicine. These specialists often commanded higher shares of plunder and played crucial roles in planning operations. The ship's quartermaster, in particular, served as both a military strategist and a business manager, responsible for intelligence gathering, supply procurement, and crew discipline. The most sophisticated pirate operations included contingency planning for various scenarios, successful crews prepared for encounters with naval vessels, hostile weather, crew injuries, and mechanical failures. They identified multiple escape routes from potential raid locations and established rendezvous points where scattered vessels could regroup. These contingency plans often meant the difference between a successful raid and a catastrophic encounter with naval forces. Long-term strategic thinking separated the most successful pirate leaders from mere opportunistic raiders. They understood that sustainable pirate operations required maintaining delicate relationships with colonial governors, merchant communities, and even naval commanders. Some pirates operated under letters of marque, essentially legal licenses to attack enemy shipping, which provided both legitimacy and protection. Others cultivated relationships with corrupt officials who would provide warnings about naval patrols or safe passage through certain territories. The decline of effective pirate heist planning often coincided with increased naval sophistication and international cooperation. As naval forces developed better intelligence networks, faster ships, and more coordinated patrol patterns, the advantage shifted away from pirates. The same careful planning and intelligence gathering that had made pirates successful became increasingly difficult to maintain as their enemies adopted similar methods. Understanding these historical pirate operations reveals that success in maritime robbery required the same skills that made legitimate merchants and naval commanders successful: careful planning, intelligence gathering, resource management, and strategic thinking. The romantic image of pirates as wild, impulsive adventurers obscures the reality that the most effective pirates were essentially maritime entrepreneurs who happened to operate outside the law. The legacy of pirate heist planning can be seen in later developments in naval strategy, intelligence gathering, and even modern maritime security. The techniques pioneered by Golden Age pirates for gathering intelligence, coordinating multiple vessels, and exploiting weaknesses in enemy operations were eventually adopted and refined by legitimate naval forces. Throughout history, few figures have captured the imagination like the shadowy operatives who slipped through castle corridors and foreign ports, gathering intelligence and planning the downfall of kings. These were the pirates who masterminded elaborate heists not through brute force alone, but through careful calculation and strategic brilliance. Tonight we journey into the methodical world of maritime criminals who turned piracy into an art form. The golden age of piracy, spanning roughly from 1650 to 1730, produced more than just swashbuckling adventurers. It created a generation of maritime strategists whose planning rivaled that of any military campaign. These weren't desperate men stumbling into fortune. They were calculated predators who understood that successful piracy required the same elements as any complex operation: intelligence, timing, deception, and flawless execution. Consider the legendary Captain Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, who captured over 400 vessels during his brief but spectacular career. His success wasn't born from luck or superior firepower. It came from meticulous preparation and an intelligence network that stretched across the Caribbean like an invisible web. Before Roberts ever raised his black flag, he knew exactly what ships carried what cargo, which routes they travelled, and when they would be most vulnerable. The foundation of any successful pirate operation was information. Pirates cultivated extensive networks of informants in every major port from Port Royal to Boston. These weren't casual arrangements. They were carefully maintained relationships built on mutual benefit, fear, and sometimes genuine friendship. Tavern keepers, dock workers, ship chandlers, and even colonial officials found themselves on pirate payrolls, feeding crucial intelligence about shipping schedules, cargo manifests, and naval patrols. Pirates understood that information was more valuable than gold. A well-placed informant could reveal that a Spanish treasure galleon would be leaving Cartagena on a specific date, carrying silver from the mines of Potosi. Another might report that a merchant vessel had been delayed in port, making it an easy target for interception. The most valuable informants were those with access to official documents. Corrupt harbour masters, customs officials, and even naval officers occasionally found pirate gold more appealing than colonial salaries. The intelligence gathering process was systematic and thorough. Pirates maintained detailed logs of shipping patterns, noting seasonal variations, typical cargo loads, and the defensive capabilities of various merchant vessels. They tracked the movements of naval patrols, learning their schedules and identifying gaps in coverage. Some pirate captains employed spies who posed as sailors, joining merchant crews specifically to gather intelligence from within. Captain Henry Morgan, though technically a privateer, exemplified this intelligence-driven approach during his raids on Spanish territories. Before his famous assault on Panama in 1671, Morgan spent months gathering information about the city's defences, the location of treasure houses, and the movements of Spanish forces. His spies infiltrated the city, mapped escape routes, and identified key targets. When Morgan finally struck, he did so with surgical precision, knowing exactly where to find the greatest wealth and how to extract it efficiently. Pirates also understood the importance of maritime intelligence. They studied wind patterns, ocean currents, and seasonal weather variations. This knowledge allowed them to predict where merchant ships would be forced to sail and when they would be most vulnerable. During hurricane season, for instance, pirates knew that ships would cluster in certain protected harbours, creating opportunities for coordinated attacks. The intelligence network extended beyond immediate tactical concerns. Pirates tracked the personal habits of ship captains, learning who was likely to fight and who might surrender without resistance. They identified which merchants carried bribes for safe passage, and which naval commanders might be persuaded to look the other way. This psychological intelligence proved just as valuable as information about cargo and schedules. Communication within these networks relied on coded messages, secret meetings, and elaborate systems of signals. Pirates developed their own forms of encryption, using seemingly innocent merchant correspondence to convey sensitive information. A letter discussing sugar prices might actually contain details about a treasure ship's departure date. These communication methods were sophisticated enough to operate across vast distances and multiple languages. The most successful pirates also understood the importance of counterintelligence. They fed false information to their enemies, spreading rumours about their whereabouts and intentions. Some pirates employed double agents, sailors who appeared to work for merchants or naval forces, while actually serving pirate interests. This deception created confusion among their opponents and provided additional layers of protection for pirate operations. With intelligence networks established and information flowing, successful pirates turned their attention to the critical element of timing. The difference between a successful raid and a catastrophic failure often came down to striking at precisely the right moment. Pirates studied their targets with the patience of predators, waiting for the perfect convergence of opportunity and vulnerability. Timing began with understanding the rhythms of maritime commerce. Pirates knew that Spanish treasure fleets typically sailed in spring and fall, following predictable routes from the Americas to Europe. Merchant vessels carrying valuable cargo often travelled during specific seasons to avoid storms or take advantage of favourable winds. By synchronising their operations with these patterns, pirates maximised their chances of intercepting lucrative targets. Weather played a crucial role in pirate timing strategies. Experienced captains understood that fog could provide perfect cover for an approach, while storms might drive merchant ships into predictable harbours. Pirates often positioned themselves near islands or coastal areas where ships sought shelter, knowing that vessels driven by weather were vulnerable and their crews exhausted. Some pirates became expert meteorologists, reading wind patterns and cloud formations to predict when conditions would favour their operations. The timing of attacks within a single day was equally important. Dawn raids caught crews sleepy and unprepared, while dusk attacks used failing light to mask pirate approach until the last moment. Pirates understood that merchant sailors were typically least alert during mealtimes and shift changes. Night attacks, though riskier for navigation, could achieve complete surprise if executed properly. Pirates also timed their operations around the schedules of naval patrols. Through their intelligence networks, they learned when warships would be in port for supplies or repairs, creating windows of opportunity in previously dangerous waters. Some pirates deliberately operated in areas where naval presence was minimal or where local commanders were known to be corrupt or incompetent. Seasonal timing extended beyond weather considerations. Pirates understood that certain times of year offered better opportunities for specific types of operations. During harvest seasons, merchant ships carried agricultural products that, while less glamorous than gold, could be easily sold and provided steady income. Holiday periods often saw increased merchant traffic as goods moved to markets for seasonal celebrations. The most sophisticated pirates coordinated multiple operations simultaneously, timing coordinated attacks across different regions to overwhelm naval responses. While one pirate crew attacked shipping lanes near Jamaica, another might strike near the Carolinas, spreading defensive forces too thin to respond effectively to either threat. This required precise coordination and reliable communication across vast distances. Personal timing was equally crucial. Pirates studied the habits of individual ship captains and merchants, learning their preferred routes, stopping points, and schedules. Some merchants were creatures of habit, following the same patterns year after year. Pirates exploited this predictability, positioning themselves along known routes at precisely the right times to intercept specific vessels. The timing of market conditions also influenced pirate operations. Pirates monitored commodity prices in various ports, striking when certain goods commanded premium prices. A cargo of sugar might be worth twice as much in Boston as in Port Royal, making the timing of an attack and subsequent sale crucial to maximizing profits. Pirates even timed their attacks based on the phases of the moon. New moon periods provided darker nights for stealthy approaches, while full moons offered better visibility for navigation, but increased the risk of early detection. Experienced pirate captains learned to balance these considerations, choosing lunar conditions that best supported their specific tactical approaches. The most successful pirates understood that timing was not just about external conditions, but also about their own capabilities. They timed operations when their crews were fresh, well supplied, and motivated. Extended periods at sea could leave crews exhausted and potentially mutinous, making the timing of operations critical to maintaining discipline and effectiveness. While intelligence and timing provided the foundation for successful pirate operations, psychological warfare often determined the ultimate outcome. Pirates understood that their reputation could be as powerful as their cannons, creating fear that made future operations easier and more profitable. The most successful pirates cultivated carefully crafted images designed to achieve specific psychological effects on their targets. Blackbeard, perhaps the most famous practitioner of psychological warfare, understood that his appearance could be as intimidating as his actions. Edward Teach deliberately cultivated a terrifying image, weaving hemp into his beard and lighting slow matches beneath his hat during battle, creating an almost supernatural appearance wreathed in smoke. This carefully constructed persona preceded him, often causing ships to surrender without resistance when they recognized his distinctive flag. The use of flags became a sophisticated form of psychological manipulation. Pirates developed distinctive banners that conveyed specific messages to their targets. The traditional skull and crossbones warned of death, while more elaborate designs might indicate the captain's particular proclivities. Some pirates used multiple flags, beginning an approach under false colours before revealing their true identity at the last moment, maximising psychological shock. Pirates understood that their treatment of prisoners and captured crews would be widely reported, creating reputations that influenced future encounters. Some pirates, like Black Sam Bellamy, cultivated images as gentlemen pirates who treated captives well and shared wealth with their crews. This reputation made merchant sailors less likely to resist and more willing to cooperate during raids. Conversely, pirates like Edward Lowe deliberately cultivated reputations for extreme cruelty, understanding that fear could be more effective than kindness in ensuring compliance. Tales of Lowe's sadistic treatment of prisoners spread throughout the maritime community, causing many ships to surrender immediately rather than risk his wrath. This reputation became a weapon in itself, reducing the need for actual violence in many encounters. The timing and manner of revealing pirate identity became a crucial psychological tactic. Pirates often approached under false flags, posing as friendly merchants or naval vessels until close enough to make escape impossible. The moment of revelation, when the pirate flag was raised and intentions became clear, was carefully choreographed for maximum psychological impact. Pirates employed various deception tactics beyond false flags. Some disguised their ships to appear as different vessel types, adding or removing masts, changing sail configurations, or altering their profiles to confuse potential targets. Fast, maneuverable pirate vessels might disguise themselves as slow merchant ships, luring potential prey into vulnerable positions before revealing their true nature. Decoy tactics were particularly sophisticated. Pirates sometimes used captured merchant vessels as bait, sailing them in convoy formations that appeared normal while pirate ships lurked nearby. When naval vessels or other pirates approached what appeared to be vulnerable merchants, they found themselves facing a coordinated trap. These deceptions required precise timing and coordination between multiple vessels. Communication deception was equally important. Pirates intercepted and forged official documents, creating false orders that could misdirect naval patrols or merchant convoys. Some pirates employed individuals who could mimic official seals and handwriting, producing convincing forgeries that opened doors to restricted information or created opportunities for infiltration. Pirates also understood the power of misinformation. They deliberately spread false rumors about their whereabouts, intentions, and capabilities. A pirate captain might ensure that reports reached colonial authorities suggesting he was operating in one area while actually planning operations elsewhere. This misdirection dispersed defensive efforts and created opportunities in unexpected locations. The most sophisticated pirates employed what modern intelligence services would recognize as disinformation campaigns. They planted false intelligence about their own operations while simultaneously spreading accurate information about their enemies' movements. This double game required careful management but could provide significant tactical advantages. Some pirates mastered the art of impersonation, with crew members capable of posing as merchants, naval officers, or government officials. These individuals could gather intelligence, arrange meetings, or even negotiate directly with targets while concealing their true affiliations. The success of these operations depended on detailed knowledge of customs, speech patterns, and behaviours appropriate to their assumed roles. Pirates also used captured documents and official correspondence to maintain their deceptions. A captured merchant ship might yield not only cargo, but also letters of transit, bills of lading, and other paperwork that could be used to establish false identities or create cover stories for future operations. With intelligence gathered, timing perfected, and psychological groundwork laid, successful pirates turned to the tactical execution of their plans. This phase required military-level precision and coordination, transforming individual criminals into effective fighting units capable of overwhelming larger, better-armed opponents through superior organization and technique. The approach phase of a pirate attack was carefully choreographed. Pirates used their knowledge of wind patterns and ocean currents to position themselves advantageously, often approaching from directions that gave them speed and maneuverability advantages. They studied their target's likely escape routes, positioning additional vessels, or planning maneuvers to cut off retreat options. Communication during operations relied on pre-arranged signals that could convey complex instructions without alerting targets. Pirates developed systems using flags, sail configurations, cannon shots, or even the positioning of crew members on deck to coordinate movements between multiple vessels. These signals had to be clear to fellow pirates, while appearing innocent to potential targets. Boarding operations were practiced extensively. Pirates drilled their crews in the techniques of swinging from rigging, using grappling hooks, and fighting in the confined spaces of ship decks. The most effective pirate crews could overwhelm a merchant vessel's defences within minutes of making contact, minimizing the time available for resistance or calls for help. Pirates understood the importance of controlling key areas of captured ships immediately. Teams were assigned specific targets: the ship's wheel, the captain's cabin, the cargo holds, and any areas where weapons might be stored. This systematic approach prevented organized resistance and ensured rapid control of valuable prizes. The most successful pirates prepared for multiple contingencies. They developed plans for what to do if their primary target proved too well defended, if naval vessels appeared unexpectedly, or if weather conditions changed during an operation. These contingency plans included predetermined rendezvous points, alternative escape routes, and methods for abandoning operations if necessary. Equipment and weapons were carefully selected and maintained for specific purposes. Pirates favoured weapons that were effective in close-quarters combat and could be used while climbing rigging or fighting on unstable decks. Cutlasses, pistols, and boarding axes were preferred over longer weapons that might become entangled in ropes or sails. Medical preparations were surprisingly sophisticated. Pirate crews included individuals with surgical knowledge who could treat wounds sustained during operations. Pirates understood that injured crew members reduced operational effectiveness and that quick medical attention could mean the difference between life and death for wounded comrades. Pirates also planned for the rapid evaluation and processing of captured cargo. They developed systems for quickly identifying the most valuable items, separating goods that could be easily transported from those that required special handling. This efficiency was crucial because pirates needed to complete their operations and escape before naval forces could respond. The interrogation of captured crews was systematic and purposeful. Pirates sought information about other vessels, cargo manifests, and the movements of naval patrols. They developed techniques for encouraging cooperation while avoiding unnecessary violence that might harden resistance or create negative publicity. Escape procedures were as carefully planned as approach tactics. Pirates identified multiple exit routes, considering wind conditions, tide patterns, and the likely response of local authorities. They maintained caches of supplies at strategic locations and established relationships with individuals who could provide assistance or safe harbour when needed. The most sophisticated pirate operations included plans for disposing of evidence and maintaining cover stories. Pirates might alter their ships' appearances after successful raids, change their flags and identification, or even temporarily disperse their crews to avoid detection during subsequent investigations. Beyond individual raids, the most successful pirates developed comprehensive strategies for long-term operations. These strategies encompassed supply networks, base establishments, and the cultivation of political relationships that could provide protection and support for extended periods. Supply networks were crucial for sustained pirate operations. Unlike naval vessels that could rely on government support, pirate ships needed to acquire food, water, ammunition, and repair materials through irregular channels. The most successful pirates established relationships with suppliers in multiple ports, creating redundant networks that could continue functioning even if some connections were discovered and severed. These supply networks often involved legitimate merchants who found pirate gold more appealing than colonial regulations. Ship chandlers, food suppliers, and weapon dealers in ports throughout the Caribbean and North American coast provided services to pirates, often through intermediaries who maintained plausible deniability. Some suppliers operated under the protection of corrupt colonial officials who received portions of pirate profits in exchange for their silence. Pirates also established their own supply sources through strategic partnerships with isolated communities. Fishing villages, logging camps, and agricultural settlements in remote areas often welcomed pirate trade, exchanging fresh food and supplies for manufactured goods that were otherwise difficult to obtain. These relationships provided pirates with reliable supply sources while giving isolated communities access to wider commercial networks. The establishment of secure bases was essential for long-term pirate operations. Unlike the temporary anchorages used for individual raids, these bases provided facilities for ship repair, cargo storage, and crew rest. The most famous pirate strongholds, like Port Royal in Jamaica and Nassau in the Bahamas, offered not just physical security, but also political protection from sympathetic or corrupt colonial authorities. Base selection required careful consideration of multiple factors. Pirates needed harbours that could accommodate their vessels while being defensible against naval attack. They preferred locations with multiple escape routes, either through shallow channels that larger naval vessels couldn't navigate, or through complex waterways that offered concealment and evasion opportunities. The most sophisticated pirate bases included facilities for ship construction and repair. Pirates captured carpenters, blacksmiths, and other skilled craftsmen, either pressing them into service or offering them lucrative contracts to maintain pirate fleets. These technical capabilities allowed pirates to modify captured vessels, improving their speed and armament for future operations. Political relationships were perhaps the most complex aspect of long-term pirate strategy. Pirates understood that their activities existed within larger political frameworks, and that success often depended on navigating these relationships skillfully. Some pirates allied themselves with colonial authorities who found pirate activities useful for harassing their political enemies. Privateering commissions provided legal cover for what were essentially pirate operations. During periods of international conflict, pirates could obtain letters of marque from various governments, allowing them to attack enemy shipping under the protection of law. Skilled pirate captains might hold multiple commissions from different authorities, selecting which one to claim based on the nationality of their targets. The most successful pirates understood that their activities had economic and political implications beyond simple theft. Their attacks on Spanish shipping served the interests of English and Dutch colonial authorities who welcomed any disruption of Spanish trade monopolies. Pirates who understood these larger dynamics could position themselves as useful tools of unofficial colonial policy. Resource management extended beyond immediate supplies to include the careful handling of captured wealth. Pirates needed to convert stolen goods into usable currency, often requiring relationships with merchants who could purchase cargo without asking uncomfortable questions. This process required understanding of market conditions, currency exchange rates, and the complex networks of international trade. The most sophisticated pirates developed investment strategies that extended their wealth beyond immediate consumption. Some purchased legitimate businesses or properties, creating legal sources of income that could support them during periods when active piracy was too dangerous. Others invested in trading ventures or even in the improvement of their base facilities. Crew management was a crucial long-term consideration. pirates needed to maintain discipline and motivation among men who lived outside conventional social structures. The most successful pirate captains developed codes of conduct that regulated behaviour, distributed wealth fairly, and provided for injured or disabled crew members. These codes served as primitive social contracts that maintained unit cohesion during extended operations. The recruitment and training of new crew members required ongoing attention. Pirates needed to replace losses from combat, disease, and desertion while maintaining operational security. They developed networks for identifying potential recruits, often targeting sailors who had grievances against merchant employers or naval service conditions. As the golden age of piracy drew to a close, the most successful practitioners had evolved far beyond simple sea robbers. They had created sophisticated organizations that combined military efficiency with commercial acumen, intelligence networks with strategic planning, and tactical brilliance with long-term vision. These maritime entrepreneurs understood that successful piracy required the same skills as any complex business enterprise: market analysis, risk management, human resources, and strategic planning. The methods pioneered by these pirates influenced naval tactics and commercial practices for generations. Their innovations in ship design, communication systems, and crew organization were studied and adopted by legitimate maritime forces. The intelligence networks they established provided templates for later espionage organizations, while their psychological warfare techniques influenced military thinking about the role of reputation and fear in conflict. Perhaps most significantly, these pirates demonstrated that success in any endeavour requires systematic preparation, careful planning, and flawless execution. Their heists succeeded not because of luck or superior firepower, but because they approached their criminal enterprises with the professionalism of merchants and the discipline of soldiers. They proved that even in the lawless world of piracy, intelligence and planning could triumph over chaos and chance. The legacy of these maritime strategists extends far beyond their immediate historical period. Their understanding of intelligence gathering, timing, deception, and coordination provided lessons that remain relevant to any complex undertaking. Whether planning a business venture, organizing a military campaign, or simply coordinating a complicated project, the principles they developed continue to offer insights into the fundamental requirements for success. In the end, the most successful pirates of the Golden Age succeeded because they understood a truth that remains constant across all human endeavors. Preparation and planning are the foundations upon which all great achievements are built. Their heists worked not because they were lucky, but because they had done the work necessary to create their own luck. They had gathered the intelligence, perfected the timing, mastered the deception, and practiced the execution that transformed desperate criminals into masters of their chosen profession. The ships have long since rotted away, the treasure has been spent or lost, and the men who planned these elaborate heists have been dead for centuries. But their methods remain, preserved in historical records and maritime legend, testifying to the enduring power of human intelligence, creativity, and determination. In the shadowy world where desperation met opportunity, these pirates proved that even crime, when practiced with sufficient skill and preparation, could become an art form.